America has immigrants that come in and we're not the nicest people. Americans are really sheltered and sometimes they'll yell at you, speak English, and assimilate.
Meet Alden, an American actress who lived in China for 8 years and has now been in France for 2. She told me how American culture differs from Chinese and European ones, what shocks Americans about living in China, and the biggest advantages of being in Paris as an American. I'm Max Chernov, your insider to Expat Life. So,
What's the biggest difference, you think, in Chinese lifestyle or culture and American?
One of the biggest differences I felt, but it is changing, is the Chinese are very close to their families, so big families. And so they would have, they'd all live in the same house, grandparents, parents, kids, and they worked nearby and the kids went to school nearby. Whereas Americans, at least my generation, when you go to college, you go far away from home. And then you kind of build up your career and you move someplace else. We're constantly moving so that when we have kids, we don't have the grandparents nearby to take care of the kids. So there's not that loyalty. We love our families, but it's not the same as I feel Chinese do, where families first, then company, and then your neighbors, Whereas Americans, we've kind of dropped our original family, we've gone to company, and then it's like our neighbors and our friends. It makes bringing up kids difficult. And that's why, childcare is really hard to find in America. We don't have the parents or relatives to take care, and both parents are working. It's nearly impossible to afford a house and a lifestyle in America without both parents working. And that means kids are having less and less time with, their family.
In Europe, is also domestic help is not common here.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I don't have any house help here. Yeah. I miss it.
So you would say China is more like a hustle culture in terms of work and business?
Yeah, I would say China is more make your own way, make your own path, create it as you go, the old Wild West, Whatever's needed, someone's going to figure it out. Whoever's first is going to, whereas Europe is more like, this is how we've done it, we'll always do it this way, this is the tradition. And that's what makes it superior, because it's been done for hundreds of years. Maybe America's somewhere in between that. I don't know. I like the hustle, though. I like the, how can I make this work? Because that means to me that if you're quick enough, smart enough, or know enough people, you can still get it done. Whereas sometimes here, it feels like there are gatekeepers. My family is not in wine. For me to get into wine now is nearly impossible. And especially in the acting community. If you didn't go to school for it, or if you don't know the certain directors or certain production or whatever, there's a gate. It's going to be harder for you to get in.
Yeah. You know what also I noticed on this time in Europe? In Singapore, so I'm a white Caucasian looking dude.
Right?
In
You
Asia,
don't look Singaporean.
yeah, in Asia, not only Singapore, but let's say you go to Thailand, I'll be automatically perceived as a foreigner. So they will never even question that I'm a foreigner. So I'm not Thai for sure.
Right.
I'm sure there are Thai white looking Thai, but it's so rare. So automatically they start speaking to me in English. I perceived as a foreigner is a good and a bad thing. So it's it's already preset. Our relationships, let's say, go to Starbucks, relationships are preset.
Right.
Here is different because I look the same as Europeans, so this is French.
Yeah.
So they start speaking to me in French, and I'm in different position.
Yeah.
Let's say. You see?
Yeah, I totally do.
Yeah.
We've talked about this quite a lot, actually. That's why I think our transition in China was so different than this transition. Like you said, when we went to China, we're obviously not Chinese. And I like to liken it to when you're walking your dog and your dog sees another dog. It's like, oh my gosh. They want to talk to each other. They compare notes and whatever else. So anytime I was walking around in China and I saw another person who looked like me, I'd be like, oh, hey, have you found bacon? How do I do this? Tell me where the best dry cleaner is, because we could talk. And here, because I look like I should understand what I'm doing or should speak French, it can be a little less welcoming. It can be like, why can't you figure this out? I feel dumber here, which is terrible. But again, they've been a lot friendlier than it used to be, and so it hasn't been so bad. But I think there was an instant community in China because it was like, obviously you need help. Everywhere I went, like, what can I do to help you? Whereas here is like, figure it out yourself. And maybe that's why my kids had a harder time.
Do you think you changed as an American, or your perspective to America changed through these years abroad?
Both, for sure. I always considered myself pretty open to things, but I didn't understand the difficulty people coming to America from a different country would be going through.
Yeah.
You know, trying to learn the language, trying to get a job, trying to have their kids get along in the culture, meet friends, do things that are different, eat different foods. Sometimes you just want a day that's like normal, and that's hard to provide as a mom, you know? And so I'm gonna get teary-eyed because America has immigrants that come in and we're not the nicest people. Americans are really sheltered, and sometimes they'll yell at you, you know, speak English, and assimilate. I can't imagine how hard it must be to work a job, trying to get your kids comfortable and keep your family going. So I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for people trying to make the opposite move that I did.
Yeah.
And then also just the whole fact of like, this is going to sound so stupid, but when I first moved to China, there were some things that I felt were rudimentary or less than or even backwards. I think that's a terrible thing to say, but that's how I thought. A hole in the floor to go to the restroom in for Americans looks like, what is this? You know, this is so backwards. This is so old school. And now I look at it, I'm like, we sit on something.
Yeah, it's convenient. I agree.
It's like your brain is so set on one thing as being the right thing and one thing being the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking, well, no, wait, actually, ours is grosser. You know, or taking off your shoes for coming into the house.
Yeah.
Like France is famous for not picking up dog poop, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to walk right into your house with it. But actually, it's in China where you take off your shoes. It's those kind of things where I'm like, just try to think why these things have evolved. These cultures, like this building right there is older than my country. You know?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Americans, we have no idea of the history that's happening here. You can walk past downtown, you can see bullet holes. Americans don't understand what it means to have a war on your front doorstep, you know? So those are the kind of things that I just had to wrap my head around, being like, ooh, there's so much more depth. And if they're doing something here that seems different to what we're doing in America, there's probably a reason.
Yeah.
They had a long time to develop this. There's probably a reason why they do it that way. So keep your minds open. Now, let me say, Americans are amazing at developing new technology and trying new things and, you know, coming up with all sorts of creative and fantastic ideas. So I think there is a good part to say that Americans are more capable and willing to try something new. Whereas maybe here it gets a little more ingrained in that we've always done it this way. We're not going to do it a different way. But there's good things in both.
Yeah. You've been in China for 8 years?
Yes.
And you're originally from the US,
Yes.
right? What way of life and like the approach to life is more close like to you, more suitable to you?
It's funny because I grew up in Texas and Oklahoma and California and Colorado. And so very middle America. By the time I was in high school, I already felt uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I got along with anyone there. So I went to boarding school in California, searching for something, obviously. I started studying Japanese, and the soonest opportunity I could go, I was already working with Hong Kong and China. So I always felt like there was something of that part of the world that made sense to me. But like living here in France, I feel very a fish out of water. I know there's so much great food, but I don't know how to cook it. I don't know how to find things. I have not yet learned the language. I've been here 2 years. I can really only say please and thank you and, you know, une baguette, s'il vous plaît. But I learned Chinese really fast. So I wonder, I don't know, past lives or something.
Yeah.
But I do miss American food. I miss the openness that Americans have. Like, we have all kinds of people in America, obviously. We have very angry and violent people, but we also have really open and kind and welcoming people.
Yeah.
And people here in France tell me, oh, I knew you were an American because you walked down the street with a smile on your face. That's an American thing? They say, yeah, you guys are always so like forward. So I don't know. I'm not sure which one's best for me.
No, this smile on the face is definitely not a French thing. And I think they're proud of it.
Yeah, I think so
like,
too.
You need to be a little bit grumpy, like to be like real French.
And actually, we've had a lot of discussions about this. Is the smile a defense mechanism? Is it like we're just, don't get mad at me, I'm just, maybe it's a frightened thing that we do. But when I was in China, anytime there was an accident or something, an emergency or something like that, I definitely noticed that my colleagues, my friends, the Americans, sometimes the Brits, would run towards the emergency, trying to help out, whereas other people were running away from it. And I thought that's very strange. We're very proactive, I guess. So I'm proud of my culture in some ways, but yeah.
Some people say, oh, Americans like smile is like a fake smile, so they don't mean it. When they say, it's this the funny article I read about like how decision made in Silicon Valley in the startup industry. So it even was the dictionary for like, what if the investor tell you, oh, it's great, it's amazing, like great job. It doesn't mean that it's a great job. It means you're not failed yet.
Right.
So it means, like you're doing okay, and maybe they will consider your project.
Yeah.
And it's like, there are a lot of like cultural, I think, especially if you compare France to the US, it's like kind of different.
For sure, I've noticed that. And also we have a saying, kind of an understanding in America where New York and LA are very different.
Yeah.
A person in New York, if you ask them to go do something, they'll say, no, don't feel like it. A person in LA say, oh, that sounds awesome, yeah. And then they won't show up.
Yeah.
It's just two different ways of the same answer. And it's like, how do you like to receive that news? And I actually tend to be a person like, I would rather you say, yeah, I'll be there, and then not show up.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends are like, well, then you just lied to me. And I'm like, well, but to me, it was like a softening, like, okay, so I think in a way I am very American in that. I just expect you not to show up. That's okay with me. But I can understand how that's very disconcerting. It doesn't make sense. My husband is an American who works in France, and he's had some issues in the work culture because if he's going to give a review to someone, they sit down and he will tell you, at least 2 good things that you're doing. You're showing up on time every day at work. We really appreciate that. You're very communicative. We're understanding where you're coming from. So the French person is now like, oh my God, I'm getting a promotion. This is great, And then he's like, but we also need, your time reports to be better, and you need to work on this, whatever. And so it's like, they didn't even hear those last 2 because they were so happy with hearing something good. So that miscommunication can happen too. And my kids go to the American school here in Paris. At first I was like, oh, I'd rather them, get in the culture, go to the Parisian school. First, they didn't speak French, so that wasn't going to happen. But secondly, they said, the teachers here are really harsh. And I said, well, what does that mean? And say, they post the grades outside the door of every kid. So you know what your friend made on the test. They will actually tell you, you're being stupid. You should have known this answer. My kids would not do well with that kind of feedback. They just have never had that in their lives.
Yeah.
We're more gentle in that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've definitely noticed some very different cultural acceptances, especially in business. But also in like China and Japan, I feel like it's very different too, where the Chinese never would raise their hand for a problem. If somebody said, this is what we want to do, this is what our concept is, how do we do it? They almost always say yes. They're going to find a way to do it. If they can't do it, they're going to find a niece or a nephew who can. They're going to find the parts, whatever. But nobody ever says, hey, I think there might be a problem here, because that's like really frowned upon.
Yeah.
And the American is always like hand up, always going to talk through the meetings, always has an idea or something to change or whatever else. So I don't know which one's better.
There is some studies about how the normal talk going in between let's say 2 Americans or like American and Canadian, let's say, how people talk. So one person is talking like from here to here, and then the person never stops. So the second person start talking at the end of the first person is like finishing. So it's always overlapping.
Right.
But if you're, let's say, Korean or Japanese, you would never interrupt here. You will wait. But then, if you're, let's say, it's like 1 Japanese in the room and like 2 Americans in the room, Japanese will never have a chance to speak.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's so funny. It's exactly right. And I actually heard that, like, if you are, speaking in a group of people and then you ask the crowd, does anybody have a question? Sometimes cultures they don't want to raise their hand. They don't want to make you look bad. So they'll wait for you to call on them, which is never going to happen. Americans never going to call on somebody who doesn't have their hand up, you know? So it's so strange. I'm glad though that these things are being talked about because it's so important. If somebody goes quiet in a conversation with me, I get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, what's wrong? Did you not understand me? Are you not happy? But really, I need to shut up, let them process, and let them say something.
There are actually like another study that I've read. It's the tolerance to silence. So Americans have very short tolerance. So if someone is not responding for 1 second, it start feeling very uncomfortable.
Yes.
I think the longest one, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Koreans. So the pause, normal pause is like six seconds. So between the answer and the question, the answer, it's basically 6 seconds, and it's normal. So because they need to process, and it even would be like perceived rude if they start talking right away, because they never thought properly about it.
That's funny. Yeah, I would definitely be uncomfortable if somebody went quiet for 6 seconds. I'd be like, looking around and be like, did I miss something?
But it's like this way of like Californian way. It's like Asian way. Basically, you never say in the face of someone like, "Oh, I don't want to go there."
Right.
Or, you never say it.
Never
right?
say that. You always agree, being like, "That's really great. I'll totally be there."
Yeah.
And then not go.
Yeah. What was your first impressions when you arrived like 2 years ago?
We arrived right after the pandemic, and we had had our vaccinations, but we had never had COVID. We got it on the way here, on the airplane.
Lucky. So lucky.
But we found that the medical system here was so much easier.
Easier
cheaper
than
in America.
Okay.
Because in America, I mean, first off, your insurance is so expensive, and then trying to find, a doctor that'll take you in, and then, trying to get the vaccination and whatever else, the shots or whatever you need. And here, it's kind of like, at that point, they were testing for COVID outside in tents. Like, you didn't even have to make an appointment. You just kind of walked in or whatever. The pharmacies were giving the shots. You don't have to go to your doctor first and whatever else. So we found that, first of all, like super easy and super nice and fast. I remember thinking, oh, the Parisians are not known for being nice or friendly.
Yeah.
But everyone here has been incredibly friendly.
Yeah.
And very quick to speak English, actually. I wish they were more not willing so that I could learn my French better. But I remember coming when I was 16 and thinking, oh, they're so grumpy. They don't like any of us. They're so snobby. But that's not the feeling I have at all now.
Yeah. That's what I heard. They're changing. And then
For sure.
They're willing to speak more English now. And they're kind of more open to, maybe it's the Olympic Games, something to do with it. Or maybe just a global trend, I don't know.
Like I said, right when we got here 2 years ago, they were already very welcoming. And, maybe the older generation might be a little more stickler about manners and etiquette and that sort of thing. And I actually am quite happy of the things you don't see Parisians eating on the metro. There's no people walking around with coffee and whatever. They're civilized. They sit down and have their coffee.
Exactly, because you need to enjoy the moment.
That's right.
That's a very French thing.
It's a slower, enjoy what's happening right now instead of rush back to the office and, hurry and whatever else. So I think maybe it's a bit of both. We're appreciating their lifestyle more, and they are more accepting of our mistakes.
Yeah.
And the younger generation, my generation and younger for sure, are more. Maybe they're traveling more. Maybe that's happening too. I don't know.
And in the US, you're from San Francisco, that way?
No, actually, we are
from Texas, you said. But if you go back, where would you go?
So my kids grew up in Los Angeles. One was born in Long Beach, one was born in Torrance. So they have spent 2 years in the United States in Los Angeles area. Grandparents in Oklahoma and New Mexico. But then they've spent the rest of their lives, 12 years, outside of America.
Yeah.
So anytime they go back to America, that means it's either Christmas and they're getting presents or their friends are out of school. So they think of America as presents and no school. So now going back, this is going to be tough because they're going to have to go to school and study and, there's no grandparents around, and so I'm a little. They seem to be all excited and happy about it. Oh, McDonald's and whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be a hard transition. Last time we went back, it was during the election, the 2016 election, which was Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And the news was on all the time. And because we understand English, it was constant about gun violence and, you know, the anger that was happening. I think there was a school shooting right when we arrived. I was driving at the time. Here I don't have a car, but in America I have a car, driving, and I have the news on. And I didn't realize that my two littles in the back were hearing all of this. And I'm just listening to the news, NPR, whatever it was. And one night they're going to bed, and my older started crying. He said, "Mom, I'm afraid someone's going to come in and shoot me." I was like, okay, we can't listen to the news anymore. That's not going to happen. But wow. I was just going to say, they're more international than they are American now. When somebody says, "Where are you from?" they kind of have a hesitation, like, I don't know.
How's it for your kids? Because they're like teenagers. Was it easy for them to start their like new life in France?
I think my kids have had a harder time adjusting to Paris than they did in China, but I think that's because they're teenagers. And I think the fashion has been difficult because they're teenage boys. You know, they're used to sweatpants and baseball hats. And that's not Paris. Paris, we dress up. Paris, our clothes fit. You know, they shouldn't be dirty or holes or whatever else. And so that's been tough. And then sports in America is so important, especially when you're in high school. Your teams, if you're playing baseball, you're probably playing 4 or 5 times a week. Here it's once a week, maybe. I think those things made it difficult for them to find their tribe, to find their own friends. But once they did, they can use the metro by themselves. My 14-year-old was on the metro into town and back at 10 p.m. and I'm not worried about him. He knows how to get around. He, you know, has his metro card. They meet and have Five Guys hamburgers, which is American, but still. And I think that's really fantastic, actually, that they're so independent here. They don't have to drive, which scares me to death about moving back to America.
Yeah.
I don't feel like the gun violence is here, so feel very confident that they're safer here. I don't know if the drug problem is bad here or not, but we don't see it. So that part's good too. In a lot of ways, I just feel safer for them here. I'm a little concerned going back if we're going to fit in culturally now.
Yeah. So do you feel safer here in Paris? You feel pretty safe, yeah? Yeah,
I do. The only thing I've been frustrated by is the pickpockets. But even that, you know, that's everywhere. That's China, that's LA, that's everywhere. I definitely feel safer here. One, because we're not driving. So we're in a metro, or the train. We ride bikes, but the schools are very safe, locked down out in the countryside. And like I said, my kids are teenagers, but the other funny thing is drinking is not like
not a taboo here, right?
Right. Which would make you think that kids would drink more. But in actuality, because it's like no big deal, they're not excited to go out and try it or sneak it or anything. So it really hasn't been an issue yet. I mean, granted, they're 15 and 14, but that part of it kind of makes me feel safe too. Pickpockets I've seen on the metros, but I can figure out who they are now. You know, they wear these big bags in front of them. Their hands are in their jackets. They're not in their sleeves.
Yeah.
And once you know what to look for, you're fine. Plus, it's light out till 10 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
Not in the winter, but in the summer, it's really bright out all the time. So,
for us, it's confusing because you kind of lose track of time.
Right.
Like you go out with friends and then, oh shit, it's 10 p.m. already.
I gotta go home. I gotta go to bed. Yeah.
In Singapore, it's always the same. It's like 7:30 a.m. It's
right. Because you're close to the
sunset and sunrise. Same, like 7:30 a.m., 7:30 p.m. It's 40 kilometers from the equator.
Right.
Yeah.
Los Angeles is, I mean, it's always nice there, you know. Same.
Yeah.
Here, when we first moved here, we were in a rental apartment and we had just eaten dinner and we were watching TV or something. And the neighbor from downstairs came up and was knocking on the door and was all angry. And I was like, couldn't understand first it was French, and I was like, okay. He's like, you're too loud. And I looked, I'm like, it's 10:30.
Okay.
But it was still light out. So
Yeah.
yeah, we had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah, walking the streets of Paris is like, I visually enjoyed so much.
I know.
It's, oh my God, it's so beautiful. That's why people are in style here, because you look at...
You're trying to match
all
the
of-
buildings.
Yeah,
Yeah, just the carvings above the windowsills, or just, you know, the signs for the metro are done in a font that's gorgeous, or the ironworks around the sidewalks. It's just, every detail is really fantastic. And here's the funny thing. Living here for 2 years, I start getting a little bored of it. Now, that's going to come off awful. But the buildings start looking a little bit alike. So gorgeous that they're all like, you take it for granted.
Yeah.
And then you go to like Brussels or Prague or Budapest. And it's historical too. It's fantastically historical as well. But just a little bit of difference in the architecture, and you're like, it's amazing, you know, like the bridges are different, the railways are different. And you just think that tiny little difference really does, just the graffiti in Brussels alone, I'm like, this would never happen in Paris, but I love that it does. So yeah.
Yeah, and when you realize how old is the city and the buildings. We actually stayed in Fontainebleau. It's close to Paris. That's like a little town, for almost half a year, and we lived in like a normal French building, being like 100-year-old, and for France it's like brand new. Basically, it's
I know.
a new building. Yeah.
And then think about China. Our apartment, when we got into it, was 8 years old, and the real estate agent said, this is an older apartment. 8.
Yeah.
And here, this one I think is 200.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Or we walked past the oldest restaurant the other day in Passy. I just thought to myself, how did they stay open this whole entire time? It's insane. But have you noticed there's no old cars?
Yeah.
Barely ever see an old car here.
Much more new cars like this on this trip.
Yeah.
Like last time it was more old.
Was it?
Old ones, yeah.
In America, we have this fascination with old cars, and you know, they have conventions and whatever to show off their old Lincoln Continentals or whatever. And here I never see them.
Yeah, and a lot of EVs now.
Yes.
Yeah, even buses. It's incredible. In Singapore, we have like still diesel buses, like loud and noisy and
The recycling here is really good. I think they're doing a better job as far as protecting their environment. But also they live densely, you know, and in America we live in houses spread far apart. We each have to drive everywhere. We don't have a good metro system per city. We don't have even railway lines that can get you from LA to New York. It's cumbersome, and to get that kind of funding to upgrade all of that for America is tough to get the votes through. So yeah.
What kind of roles do you play? What kind of characters?
Here in France, I have done a lot of theater this time. So Oscar Wilde and Neil Simon. So in English, which is great. So because of my gray hair, I normally play the older character. Right now I'm playing Lady Bracknell in The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a really funny play. And so I'm an older lady, which I like. But in China, I was always portrayed as the evil American. You know? Yeah.
Really?
Because the Americans were always brought in to be overcome. Right? Even if it was love interest, then the other was going to take over that, right? So as my age group, I was either the CEO that was cheating or needed to be overthrown, or what else? The scientist or the doctor that was like creating something evil. And I love being the villain, but sometimes I'm like, just because I'm an American doesn't mean I'm a terrible person. But my kids would always get hired for like dairy products or environmentally friendly something, or American products, you know, so it was like kind of the crossover for that. Or technology, that sort of thing. I don't want to be the villain anymore.
The reputation of France and Paris is like a paradise for all the creative professions.
For sure.
Is it the case?
There are so many theaters here, I don't think I could ever see them. I mean, hundreds of theaters, hundreds of shows that are going on constantly between cabaret and music and live theater and, I mean, Cirque du Soleil and Shenyun and whatever. There's so much going on any given night. It's amazing. And then, let's see, films are being shot here. I mean, Emily in Paris, TV is being shot here. We have to remember, because Brexit, the English speakers, the English can't really come over here to work and vice versa. So that has caused some issues. So there's a lot of work to be done in London and England, but my visa won't allow me, so I can't go there, but also they can't come here. So a lot of times I get hired for voiceover for a lot of the English. And then, I mean, art, how many museums? I go to a museum once a week. That's been my goal. I go on a tour once a week. So that means I'm hitting either a monument or a museum every week. That means I've seen 60, 70 museums. I still haven't seen them all. I couldn't. There's no way possible. It's just spectacular. They really support and create and promote the arts here. So if you're an artist or an actor, you will get a salary if you're at least in school or, doing, I think it's one job a month or something like that. So they really are allowing people to not go hungry for their art. And I think that's why it's the capital, to me at least, of culture and music and theater and everything.
There is enough demand here.
Yeah, and the government itself says it's important and we should fund it, and they do. And that's incredible.
Can you make more money in China, in this industry, or in Paris?
I definitely worked more in China.
Yeah.
But I had more time to create a network and, like I said, build those reputations that were so important. And I've had to set up my own business, auto entrepreneur, so that I can pay my taxes. And so that's been a bit of bureaucracy, the European bureaucracy that can always be difficult. And just as I'm figuring it all out, so hopefully it'll get better.
In China, it's like, in terms of, let's say, how set up the company is easier, more straightforward, or you don't need to have a company?
In China, you're supposed to have a company.
You're supposed to have it, yeah.
You're supposed to pay your taxes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's difficult to do because really there aren't many visas for entertainment. So instead you're doing consulting or you're doing, admin or that sort of thing, marketing. So that makes it, I think that's the reason why the agents don't work with you specifically, because it's probably not in their, is it called hukou? What is it called when they, whatever they are paying their taxes for, whatever that track of business is, it may not align with yours. So you get a lot of hongbaos, red packets. That's why I'm a little bit afraid or a little bit nervous about going back to China at this point. I don't know how foreigners are being received now. I think it's changed a lot after COVID. And I think the relations between America and China kind of soured when Trump was in. I have heard there's been a lot of changes, but I hope that our countries get along again. The people always get along. I think that's the one most important thing I've learned living in other countries, is just because the president is a certain way doesn't mean all the people are that way. And that's for every country I've been to. Not all the people of a country think the same way. Of course they don't. So it'll get back to it at some point. I think Chinese and Americans are actually very similar in a lot of ways.
Is it?
Yeah, I do.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's the similarities, you think?
They want the best for their families. They're willing to work really hard to make the step up for their family and the next step up. And if there's a will, there's a way. I mean, Americans and Chinese will work their butts off and they will find a way to make it work. They're not going to say no. Whereas I feel like in Europe, it's better to say no. That's not in my title or my job description, and I don't want to get in trouble for it, so I'm just going to say no. So that's a way I think that we can figure each other out. Yeah.
Do you have any important principle in life, let's say that help you through your career, something really important?
My kids right now are trying to decide what they want to do with their lives. Anytime somebody says, you have to make money, I think, don't give away your happiness for someone else to make money. I don't get that. So also, I don't want to make a bunch of junk that just clutters up stuff. I want to make people happy. I want to find a way that human beings, our spirits, our hearts, our minds are enjoying the brief amount of time we have on this planet. I want them to interact with each other. I hate that we're doing this all the time. I want this to come back. So to me, acting and telling stories and entertaining is bridging that. I don't make a lot of money doing it, but I love it. And my job, the job part, because we all have a job part that's not the fun part, right? My job part is writing my resume, sending out auditions, you know, self-taping, learning scripts, that sort of thing. But the brief amount of time that I get to do the entertaining of someone or telling a story that somebody is like, oh my God, that's my life. That's important. So I hope my kids continue on in something where they have to create or give spiritually. And I'm not a religious person. I just mean this as in like lift somebody else up, especially when you're feeling down, because that's the best way to get yourself back, you know. So I know we need lawyers, we need bankers. I get it. I'm not saying that nobody should do that. I'm just saying, what, you graduate college at what, 22, 23, and then you retire at 65. It's 40 years of your life. You better enjoy it. You better do something that you're making the world a better place, because it's not that much time.
Yeah. Well, what's the meaning of life for you?
Oh God. I'm still trying to figure that out. Just because I have gray hair doesn't mean that I know what the meaning of life is. I'm starting to think, you know, the saying on the airplane is the most important. When you hit turbulence, make sure your own mask is on first so that you can take care of others. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, none of us is going to survive. As a mom, as a woman, I find myself always trying to take care of everybody else. Did you eat? Did you get your paper done? Did I need to drive you here? Did the dog get the walk? I forget sometimes to take care of my own health, my own happiness, and then I get run down and I get resentful and angry and I can't get out of bed or depressed or whatever. And now I can't take care of any of these people. So more and more I'm starting to think that the key to life is to put your mask on first.
Yeah.